How does polarization make clickbait more effective? I'm Professor of Economics Ashley Hudson, and this is my perspective on how this works. Because if we want to know why we are becoming so polarized, we need to understand how that's connected with the goals that social media algorithms have as they feed us content. Now, as an economist, I think about incentives and how the social media algorithms might be incentivizing us to click on ads and to maximize their goals. Okay, I like to organize this as what you see when you're on the platform, what you feel when you're seeing that content, what the algorithm sees, and what the algorithm feels. The algorithm, of course, doesn't really feel anything, but the algorithm has been given certain goals and objectives, and so the question is the algorithm happy with what's going on, or is it unhappy? Because if it's happy, it's going to incentivize more kinds of content like that. Okay, so if we think about clickbait, the basic definition of clickbait is it's something that makes us want to click immediately. And the emotion that's going to drive clickbait, I think in many, many cases, is making us feel a sense of threat. On a very base level, threat is what we're programmed to respond to. So if you can have content that's something like, there's going to be an explosion in your neighborhood, or was there an explosion down the road from you, something like that, then you're going to feel a sense of threat. You're going to click on it to see what's going on. Now, the classic definition of clickbait is that it doesn't really deliver on its promises. It's just sort of there as a headline to get you to click, but has no substance behind it. And so the question is, will that kind of content be favored by social media algorithms? And our intuition actually goes two ways, and I think both of them are partially correct. One is that yes, the algorithm is going to see us click immediately, oftentimes when we see clickbait. So we click and the algorithm likes us to click. However, if we think about the longer run, the algorithm may not like this as much as we think, for a couple of reasons. One is we may click, say, on the video that has the clickbaity thumbnail, but then we don't stay on the platform very long. As a matter of fact, we may sort of get annoyed with the platform for serving us this kind of content and trust it less. We may, in the long run, be less likely to click on content like this. So it's not actually perfect from the algorithm's perspective. So clickbait, if it's real clickbait that has no substance, we click immediately, but it reduces our time on platform, and in the long run, we may grow used to this kind of content and no longer click. So now the algorithm has a problem. Now the question is, how does the algorithm solve this problem, given that the algorithm really, really wants us to click on this kind of content? It loves how responsive we are. And actually, part of the reason it likes how responsive we are is because of the relationship between threat and the advertisers that are selling to us on platform. The advertisers know that when we're in a state of threat, when we're in that state of anxiety, we will do almost anything to assuage that threat. And that may include buying the product that they're selling us. It may include clicking, we're highly responsive, we're like looking for a solution immediately. So this emotion is really good for advertisers. And so the algorithm would like this to work out. So the question is there a way to make us more susceptible to not only clicking on clickbait, but staying on it and being drawn back onto the platform to consume more clickbait? And of course, the algorithm is tapping into real human emotions. And real human emotions respond to real things. And of course, the content on platform isn't really real, but it's connected to reality. So if the platform can get us to connect the clickbait more to reality, more to real people we encounter in our lives, more to real people that we know truly exist, then the clickbait is going to seem more truly threatening even after we click on it. So that's how it works. And I'm going to walk through an example. This is not going to be a real example because I think that would be way too distracting. But it's going to be an example that I hope highlights how this might work in the long run, which is that the algorithm is going to figure out how to slowly feed us content that will make us more likely to actually believe the clickbait that's given to us. So this is a strategy that might work. If you can slowly feed people content that feeds them the message that auto mechanics of the world hate office workers like you, that auto mechanics are truly angry at office workers like you, then if there's an explosion that's somehow related to a car, and maybe that's a really simple explosion or something that's not really an explosion, but can be framed that way, if you attach that kind of clickbait to the anger that you have been convinced is inside the heads of all of the auto mechanics of the world, then suddenly this clickbait feels more realistic. And this clickbait is connected not with this one weird incident that you can dismiss as soon as you click on the video or click on the article. Rather, this clickbait is part of an overarching pattern that you have been trained to see in the world, where you have been trained to look for patterns of threat from a certain group of people. In which case you've taken the same clickbait and reversed this decreased time on platform. Rather, if this stuff is going on and you need to worry every time you drive by someone who might be an auto mechanic, or every time you drive by a car that might have been worked on by an angry auto mechanic, then suddenly you have to go on platform to manage that threat. And just to be clear, these are connected to each other, where feeding people this kind of content where they're seeing a pattern of a certain group of people who is a threat to them, that increases your propensity to interact with the clickbait in a way that is useful to the platform. Now, one final thing I want to point out is that this can always be counteracted if you go and have a conversation with your auto mechanic. Like, are they a normal person? Do they hate you? Do they hate office workers? You can just go and talk to them and assuage that threat. So that's a problem for the platform. However, if you perceive a group to be a threat, you start to become a threat to them. You might want to take away some of their rights. You might want them to not be able to have access to certain institutions, educational institutions, online institutions, services that are offered by the country. If you are truly afraid of the pattern you're seeing from this group of people, then you actually become a threat to that group of people because you're trying to manage your own sense of threat. So the platform can actually use your fear and your sense of threat, which is useful to get you to click on stuff. It can use that to actually validate the auto mechanic's fear of you. So let's say that there's this parallel thing going on here where auto mechanics have been told that desk workers hate them, that desk workers want to take away their rights, that desk workers have contempt for them and are just trying to hold them down economically. So now you're starting to see how this relates to polarization. If you can create two groups who perceive the other to be some sort of threat to them, or some sort of threat to something they care about, whether that's their social status or their values or their physical security, all of that stuff. If you can get both of these groups to believe that the other one sees them as a threat, that the other one wants to neutralize them, then each of the groups is going to start acting toward that other group in a way that is actually at least a little bit threatening. And that gives you real, actual content that you can give to the other group that sort of says, this is why that group really is a threat. In other words, this isn't just clickbait. Those people really do hate you, and I have examples of evidence that I've pulled from elsewhere on the same platform of real people speaking in ways that demonstrate their hatred towards groups like you. And the algorithm loves that because that means that it can validate clickbait with reality such that you spend more time on platform managing the threat that not only is perceived to be real, but that has a little bit of a real basis because that other group really does perceive you as a threat. It's this self-perpetuating cycle. Why are we so polarized? Why is polarization increasing so fast? It's because if you can get two groups to perceive each other as threats, that's an endless source of clickbait that is real clickbait to these people, that actually does show real threats. So there's an incentive to create stuff that maximizes people's perception of threat to each other, which can actually maximize people's threat in the real world. Now, one more thing I want to point out about this is that this isn't going to work if these groups actually interact with each other. So you need to have groups that don't spend much time together, or at least don't have authentic interactions in the real world, because those authentic interactions are going to reduce the sense of anxiety. It needs to be groups that are separate. And so should we be surprised that polarization happens along lines of people who don't have as many real authentic interactions between each other? No, we shouldn't. All right, well, I want to leave all of my videos with a sense of hope. Do I have a sense of hope that this can be turned around? And the answer is yes, I think this can be turned around. Basically, this is all driven by the algorithm. And the algorithm, it has certain objectives to maximize time on platform, to maximize clicks on advertisements, to maximize engagement with platform, and to maximize the selling price of your time on platform. That's what it's trying to do. But we as humans get to decide what the algorithm's goal is. We could say, you know what, we want the goal of this algorithm to get people to interact in a meaningful, authentic way with people who are different than themselves. And if you give the algorithm that goal, it's probably going to take a while to figure out how to do that. That's probably a long run process in the evolution of the algorithm, but I think it's doable. I think we can reverse this if we recognize that one of the main sources of polarization is the incentives to create this so that clickbait actually works out. So I hope you found this helpful in thinking through, why are we polarized? Why might social media be contributing? What are the mechanisms behind this? And if you're interested in thinking through problems related to social media, related to the economics of incentives on social media, the incentives behind these algorithms, that's what I'm doing on this channel. I hope you become part of a conversation. And I like to leave with discussion questions because I think we need to be talking more about what's going on here. I don't have all the answers. I get answers from people I talk to. So here's a few discussion questions to talk about with your friends, to write about below if you have a thought right now. What kinds of content can make a person perceive another group of people as a threat to them? What kinds of threats are there? There's social threats, threats to economic status, threats to social status, threats to your physical well-being. Which ones do you think are most common in terms of getting people to perceive other groups as threats? So write your thoughts below, talk about it with friends. This is a problem that is reversible. I do believe that.